Bakari, you made it. Thank you for joining us. You know, we've been talking about you.
Oh, good things, I hope.
All good, all very, very good. Listen, you do not need an introduction, but I will introduce you as one of the most compelling speakers I've had the honor and pleasure of interviewing in the past. We know that it's a particularly busy time for you and that you're literally all over the map right now. We wish you, we first of all, we thank you for the time and the attention. And with that, I'll toss you for a few words on what's keeping you busy today. I would just love to know what your schedule has been like today and most recently, and then I'm going to toss to my colleague Ayana to say.
First of all, let me just say I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And my mom and dad always say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you. So thank you for having me. And then my sincerest apologies for running a bit behind. This was not my fault today. Usually when I'm behind schedule, it's sometimes my fault, but today the weather is just a mess out there. We have storms all throughout the Southeast, and so it was really difficult getting on and off a plane today. But the last couple of weeks, I've been in New York and Baltimore, Philadelphia, DC a couple of times, back to New York. I've been in Delaware. I've been in Birmingham. I've been Chicago twice. Just this week, I was in Chicago and New York the last couple of days. I was on The View yesterday morning with my good friend Sonny Hostin and Whoopi Goldberg and a few others. And so we had an amazing opportunity to chat then, and just been a busy time. And it bothers me a lot because my number 1 and 2 goal in life are to be a good husband and good father. And you're not able to do those things really well when you're trying to make those ends meet. But I'm still upright and standing, and happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you for that, Bakari. Yeah, we were just chatting about your appearance on The View. Well, with that, I'll let Ayana say a few introductory words, and then we're going to dive right into our conversation.
Sure.
Hi, Bakari. I greet you as a fellow HBCU alumni. Thank you, Danny. And for the benefit of our special guest today, my name is Ayana Anderson, and I'm here representing our diversity, inclusion, and belonging team here at Highwire. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And our commitment to DIBs is foundational and ever evolving. And in a nod to your book title, Bakari, we strive each and every day to meet the moment by engaging in meaningful dialogue, accelerating our collective learning, and honoring our agency value, inclusion always. And so in partnership with many of our agency peers, Highwire became signatories in 2020 with the Diversity Action Alliance. And this was a collective effort with all agencies sort of acknowledging that we had work to do to close the representation gaps in our communications industry. And as we approach the 4-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder on May 25th, this is certainly a time for reflection and action. And so we are tremendously honored to spend time with you today to hear your media perspectives and so much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ayana.
You didn't mention what HBCU you went to, because, you know, although you're an HBCU alum, if you went to the wrong one, that can cause.
I went to the right one. I'm a Hampton grad. Hampton U, Pirates in the building. Yes.
My daughter goes to Howard now, so she may feel otherwise, but I don't have a dog in that.
The other HU.
The other HU. Fair enough.
Thank you, Ayana, and thanks for setting the tone. Bakari, this is as all of our conversations, it's a wide-ranging conversation. There's so much to chat about in the world we live in. You're right now, you're amongst a wide range of professional communicators, and you, amongst the many hats that you wear, you are also a professional communicator. And I wanted to start. Also, I'll introduce myself. My name is Danny Maiello. I'm one of the leaders here at Highwire PR, and I wanted to start with your perspective or your view on where we are with regard to the industry, the media industry, as a CNN commentator and as somebody who has watched it change dramatically. You are, perennially out there sort of sharing your point of view on what's important with regard to information sharing. And we'd love to hear your point of view on what's important, what we should be concerned about, if anything, at this moment in time.
No, I mean, I come from this with a few different lenses. First, I was an elected official, and so I had that somewhat narrow, what used to be conservative view of media, not conservative media, but conservative view of media with specific guardrails. I'm also a commentator, so I try to tell my truth on TV. And then when you go out and you write books or, I'm a lawyer by trade, so I try to get my message out and my story out about my particular clients, whatever issues they may be going through. You recognize that the landscape has changed exponentially. The landscape began to shift slightly in 2010. That was with the advent of the Tea Party. It was just a political a group that pulled our lens further to the right, which became the base of one of our two larger parties, or only two parties. And what you saw with the advent of Donald Trump is decently refreshing and nerve-wracking at the same time. Donald Trump had this unique ability to give people his unvarnished sense of self, for better or worse. And what that meant is that the guardrails that we were used to in discourse dissipated before our eyes. And so things that mattered once before when you were communicating, like truth, no longer are there. It's how best you can tell your story, how best you can captivate your audience, and relatability. It's unique the way that Donald Trump is able to communicate with his base because they don't come from the same backgrounds. And I think that's a messaging story to be told in a very, very, probably distant future. But when people look back at how he was able to communicate to people who come from a totally different socioeconomic level, yet resonate with his message, I think is going to be a great deal of value in that. For me personally, however, and it's fleeting. I mean, I still remember my dad sitting in that big chair that he came to every day and watching, Tom Brokaw, right? Watching these individuals who gave him the nightly news. In every community, there was that one person who came on every night locally who you respected, and you were happy to see them when they were grand marshaling your parade. That's really not the case anymore. Being on cable news, I can tell you that, and being on CNN, Ted Turner, amazing soul, created a 24-hour news cycle. And the unique thing about that 24-hour news cycle is you have to fill it with something. And we're seeing both the benefits and we're seeing the detriment to that as well. And so I say all of that to say that it is a free-for-all out here in the media cycle. It's hard to get your voices heard. I was on TV during the last year and some change of the Obama administration, and I saw happening before my eyes the change in news cycles. We went from having one serious news cycle every 24 hours to having 5 or 6 less serious news cycles in one day. And that's very hard for industries like yours to be able to keep up. And the goal for you all is to be nimble, right? You have to be nimble. You have to be able to jump in and out of stories really quick. You have to be able to find out how you can tell your story in between what's happening throughout the world and what's happening with, Stormy Daniels spanking somebody. Like, how do you find time to be able to tell your client's story and cut through all that noise is a very, very challenging task.
Yeah, well, here, and putting on your other hat as a client counselor, obviously, you're also a practicing attorney. How are you counseling your clients? I mean, no names, obviously, but is there, and I think you've already touched on this, but counseling your clients on making sure on how to get their message out there during this really, really fraught time that you just described.
Yeah, it's tough. And so there have to be extraordinary occurrences. I represented, along with Harry Daniels and Ben Crump, a young man named Andrew Brown, who was in Pasquotank County. This was 2 summers ago, and he was shot in the back of the head driving away by the police. It was the #1 news story in the world for 2 days. And, in order to be the #1 news story in the world, we had all the cameras out there. We had Craig Melvin coming down to see us. We had all of those things that were happening around us. And it was unique. It was extraordinary circumstances. And what I tell my clients today is that we usually work from grassroots up. There's so many people now that want to sit across from Anderson Cooper, right? They want to sit on Joy Reid's show. They want to be able to talk to Peter Williams or whomever. And I have to tell them it's probably going to do us better to sit down and talk to the local reporter who, honestly, she carries her own camera. She just graduated from college 2 years ago. She not only covers what's going on newsworthy today in the community, but she's also going to do sports. She's going to sub for weather, and she's probably going to do and anchor the weekends as well. And I think we can build a good relationship, and she'll follow this story so closely if we're able to do this. I also get my clients to write a lot.
Mhm.
I get them to write op-ed pieces, not necessarily about the cases, but I found writing to be very therapeutic for the client. They're able to give their own voice. Of course, they don't write it themselves, but I found that writing actually, and people run those things, and I
Mhm.
found that writing actually helps us light a fuse, helps us do a couple of things, helps us heal, but also helps us light a fuse under whatever that story may be.
That's really, really sound advice, and you're in very good company, because setting the client's expectation with regard to which outlets are going to be most impactful and which outlets are actually going to carry their story forward in a way that's going to reach the audiences that they want to reach is, that is a conversation that sometimes is difficult to have if the expectations are set on Anderson or the other folks that you mentioned. I think creating the point you make about creating one's own content, or the client creating their own content, obviously in partnership with, yourself or a team or the communications team, that really hits close to home for us as well.
And let me know, Danny, I don't know if you all do this, but look, there is a huge pipeline of business in the trial lawyer community. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you guys have focused on that, but I utilize a full-time comms person on cases, because when they come out, when we get these cases out, one of the things that me and Ben talk about all the time is that these cases, I represent Ricky Cobb in Minnesota. It's a officer involved shooting case. These cases, you have to win them not only in the court of law, but you have to win them in the court of public opinion. And
Yes.
so, and you have to compete. You're competing with the Marjorie Taylor Greens, although it's totally different, right? You're competing with the Trump salacious stories, or Joe Biden, doing whatever. I mean, you're competing with them, and so you have to learn how to find something that viewers want to see. And trial lawyers have a huge benefit from the counsel of individuals like yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. We do have partnerships with some law firms, and obviously, yeah, there's a mutually beneficial relationship that goes on there. Specific to industries, I know that you have tried cases within the energy and sustainability space with regard to the impact of sort of unfair or unequal access to food, and literally food and water within communities. Are there and we could talk about that industry, or are there industries that you feel are that much more impacted or influenced by really impactful communications?
Oh, that's a good
Your
question.
experience, right? And it might be sustainability and energy, just because I know that you've got a background in that.
Yeah, no. I mean, those are impactful usually because you're going up against mammoths, like huge entities. One of the cases we did here was against Dominion Energy. It's huge. Dominion building a pipeline throughout the Southeast. We ended up settling a case. They bought our local nuclear provider, and so we had to have a story to tell, or else you were going to get destroyed. I mean, and our story was simple. It was kind of David versus Goliath type of deal, ratepayer versus energy purveyor. And we were able to succeed on certain levels. And now we're all kumbaya moving forward together. One of the more important stories, though, is about my hometown of Denmark not having access to clean water. That story just isn't sexy.
Mhm.
It's a powerful story, but it ain't one that we got a lot of news out of. There was no big, Goliath on the other side. It was a story that could be told in Denmark, South Carolina, or Jackson, Mississippi, or Flint, Michigan. And what we recognize was that the power of ginning up local support. Again, local news is going to be your friend in a lot of these cases. And sometimes, I'm not saying you all do, but sometimes people find glory in cameras and getting a client this huge interview, when many times what moves the ball is the ability to do like local Black radio, the AM programming, the sports drive time shows. I mean, those things that drive popular opinion in that particular area. And so that's what we've been battling with. And for me being on CNN, the first thing clients say to me when they hire me is, "Are you gonna get me on CNN, right?" And I'm like, "No, that ain't the way this works."
I know. That is a question that we get as well, for those of us who have CNN on our resume. That is very interesting to a lot of clients. But I think that the counsel that you give, that CNN may not be the best place to tell the story at whatever point in time they ask you about that.
It'd be drowned out. I mean, it's just a story in between things that move people globally. I mean, sometimes your story is best nestled in a, I tell people the value of Black radio is very much underscored because, every Black person I know when they're driving to work is listening to Black radio. They're listening to, the Charlemagnes or the Ricky Smileys or the Steve Harveys and, the morning hustles in Atlanta. I mean, being able to cultivate those relationships, and they're always looking for content. 8 minutes can change your life. I was on The View yesterday for 8 minutes and my book went from, I don't know, number 3,000 on Amazon to a top 100 book.
Yeah.
8 minutes is so powerful, man. I tell people that all the time. And that's a long time. 8 minutes is a long time on TV.
Yeah, that's triple the amount from what I remember.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that you mentioned radio, and it's just funny we're in 2024 and radio is still quite, incredibly relevant, particularly as you alluded to, the different communities, right? The Latin community in particular have a lot of loyalty to Latin radio hosts as well. So that is something that is.
And I'll also tell you this, man, white male evangelicals.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. They listen to that conservative drive time news radio more than anybody you would know. I mean, what is it? Clay Travis and Buck Sexton.
Mhm.
The Ben Shapiro. I mean, they have a huge following. Rush Limbaugh's old spot. I mean, Rush Limbaugh got paid $100 million for 3 hours of radio a day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to wrap my head around that. Well, that's a segue. I know Ayana has a bunch of questions coming in from the folks on the line right now. Ayana, if you want to lob one over to Bakari, please go for it.
Sure. So one of the questions has to do with the title of your book, specifically this part, thoughts on the race reckoning that wasn't and how we can all move forward now. And the person wrote that, the racial reckoning was the narrative of 2020, right? And then it's sort of aligned with, this is a new period of, bold and empathic conversations about how to be an anti-racist and to address white fragility. And so interested in your critique about this backlash, and how do we move forward as you talk about?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I mean, I articulated in the book that we missed that moment and that I felt like we were on the precipice of a third Reconstruction. And usually that happens with Reconstructions throughout American history. You always have this immediate regression. And that's what we're seeing now, from books banned to attacks on rights that we hold true. Duke University getting rid of an African-American scholarship program, abortion laws in Arizona from the 1800s. I mean, this has been going on. And I was looking at an interview, and I challenge all of you all to go look at it. Just the introduction is fascinating. It was Vivek Ramaswamy interviewed Ann Coulter yesterday, and gave this opening monologue, and then she came on in true Ann Coulter fashion and said, "Man, I love everything you say. I absolutely love it. I agreed with everything you said when you were running for president of the United States, but I wasn't going to vote for you because you're Indian." And that literally came out of her mouth. It's a viral tweet now. It reminds me, and it harkens back at something I bring up in the book, that January 6th and Charlottesville was so amazing because nobody wore hoods. And right now, nobody covered their faces. Right now, we're living in a time where nobody's wearing hoods, where nobody's covering their faces. And for you all to understand that, unfortunately, to be successful in the industry that you're in, the most valuable driven industry is conservative media, and the rules that they play by in conservative media are just different. And the truth is weirdly subjective, which makes absolutely no sense. And so that is a whole lot about why we missed that moment, and we didn't address the true systemic ills that undergirded a lot of the problems we were seeing. But I'm hopeful. I just came to a sobering reality. When you write books, you oftentimes come to some sobering realities, and mine was that I'm be a part of the first generation that doesn't leave this country better than what we inherited.
That is very sobering. I don't know if you've been listening to the New York Times daily series on what we can expect in terms of changes within this country if and when Donald Trump becomes president. And so sort of remaining as nonpartisan as possible. Are there industries or impacts that you see sort of as most relevant if and when he enters office?
Yeah, no, I think that Donald Trump has the ability to be the most consequential president in the history of the United States. And I say that for one very specific reason. And it's not ageist, it's just true. But Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas are 73 and 74 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And if Donald Trump is elected, I don't even know if you would call that reelected. I have to talk to my editors about that. I don't know. Maybe some comms person. I mean, if you're elected, then you lose a race. Are you reelected? I don't know what that word is, but if he's elected again, to be clear, he will choose 5 members of the United States Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
which by virtue will make him very consequential. And for me, rolling back a lot of the things I hold true, but for you, it may be progress. I mean,
Right.
that, however, is definitely, we can all agree, the definition of the word consequential.
Yeah, impactful. And then a follow-up on that, is there an industry that you think would be impacted most? Obviously, we're Silicon Valley, we're at the heart of technology, we're really focused on health, we're focused.
I think that the industry that is going to clash quicker than anybody else is oil versus electric vehicle.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I see that as being like a mammoth, like huge, earth-shattering just clash that is on the brink of it's like we're on the precipice. We're watching it and nobody's paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't think that big oil is just going to allow electric vehicles to come and take a lion's share of their profit without a fight. In fact, Donald Trump just 2 days ago had a Mar-a-Lago fundraiser and encouraged big oil to raise him $1 billion. And he was going to rein in electric vehicles. So it's going to be, that is where the next, I mean, I know that was people are like, well, why do you know that, Bakari? It's because I watched the news, but it's very fascinating to know that I think is the next big fight we'll see.
That is very noteworthy for this group in particular. And like one of the hats that I and my colleagues wear is the hat of overseeing our energy and sustainability practice here. And we were just off a client call where we were talking about the impact of the election cycle on the industry. So this is very, very validating piece of information for us. Ayanna, I know you have another.
Yeah, I have some questions that are bubbling. And one of them really alludes to what you talked about just now, which is, we're in this era of green hushing and there's backlash with ESG, and it very much so parallels what we're seeing with DEI. And so for those folks who are all in on driving sustainability and environmental justice forward, like what is the light? What is the moment that we can meet to push this forward?
I don't know the answer to that. It's pretty convoluted. I mean, the person who is clearly at the forefront of innovation when it comes to alternative energy sources, particularly for vehicles, is also using his platform to allow this the conservative views that we're talking about that are doing the greenwashing, et cetera, to permeate. It's really weird. Elon is at the spear of a lot of this. And I don't know if you guys represent Elon. I wasn't told that you did or did not. So forgive me. He's not a friend of mine. I'm not a friend of his. He doesn't care for me. I don't care for him. Brilliant guy, weird guy, socially awkward guy. We've been in the same space a few times. Very, very socially awkward. But I will just say that that is a difficult question to answer when you have these forces who are working against your clientele and your base and the people that you represent so vigorously, and they're given a platform by somebody who you would think would hold views that were 180 degrees different from what they are. With all of that being said, I have been disappointed in the messaging that's come from these renewable energy alternative fuel source industries because it's been decently silent. And you're hearing Elise Stefanik, you're hearing Marjorie Taylor, you're hearing Thomas Massey, you're hearing from these very loud, maybe not effective, but loud legislators about how they're going to curb things that would make this world a better place to raise children, literally, as well as cut back on expense for many people. So there's a story to be told. I don't know what the story is. That's what you all get paid to do. But I'm not sure we're even telling that story, or if we are telling a story, we're not yelling it loud enough.
Yeah. Segueing into the technology sector, as far as obviously right versus left, regulated versus unregulated, do you, what is the biggest impact that you're seeing or that you potentially see with regard to, let's say, a Trump presidency and massive deregulation across the technology sector?
You don't have to be a rocket scientist. I mean, we are feeling deregulation on a lot of these industries from, his 4 years in office today. I mean, you're still feeling that. I mean, the gutting of his DEI offices in his federal government agencies, you're still feeling those repercussions today. When you gut things, when you deregulate things immediately, when you just open things up so all hell can break loose. The unique thing is that when you do those things, it takes years to recover. And so I think while there will be a lot of immediate benefit, and you'll see a lot of those Fortune 500 companies who are thirsting to have that back, consumers will hurt. And the question is, where do you fall on that? I mean, a lot of consumer advocates, even those who drive me completely nuts, such as Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, are getting older. And so there has to be a new generation of individuals. And what I will say is that this new generation is very rabid. They're very discerning, and they're very understanding about many of the issues that are going on around them.
Specific to Gen Z, which I think you were alluding to, what is your advice for we have a lot of Gen Z folks within our ranks, and they're very passionate about their work, as well as their passions outside of work. Do you have any advice for them with regard to how they apply their passion to their 9 to 5?
No,
No?
I don't have any advice for Gen Z. They're dope as it is. I wish people would just get out their way. Like, the last thing I'm gonna sit here and do is give them that is, Danny, that's such a boomer thing to do, man. No, we don't need to give them advice, Danny. Jesus.
I'm definitely getting called out. Well, but if it's not,
let me just say what I said in the book, Danny. Let me just say this. Listen, this is my antidote. I go to Applebee's a lot, and I go to Applebee's it's kind of like comedians. Like, I speak a lot. I travel around the world and speak a lot, but comedians, when they're in small venues, they kind of try out material on different people. And I was at Applebee's, and I go to Applebee's across from the VA because there's a interesting clientele there. You can imagine, right across from a veterans hospital, you can imagine the people that are coming in Applebee's. And I was sitting there, I was talking to my bartender, and she said, I asked her, what year was she born? We were just talking. I said, what year are you born? She was like 2000 and I was like, there's more first, because the 2000 and is aggressive. And so then I just began to think, man, and I've trotted this out a few times, a few different audiences, and I want your audience to hear this for real. Like, a child born in 2000 has lived through 9/11, a housing crisis, a financial crisis. They've lived through the first Black president, the advent of the Tea Party, the re-election of the first Black president. They've lived through Parkland. They've lived through the election of Donald Trump. They've lived through Fort Hood. They've lived through a synagogue shooting. They've lived through a Charleston massacre, in which my good friend Clemente Pinckney was killed in Charleston, South Carolina, in a church. They've lived through January 6th. They lived through Charlottesville. They've lived through a pandemic, a once in 100-year pandemic. They've lived through Russia invading Ukraine. They lived through October 7th. They lived through a war in Gaza. They've lived through all of these things under the auspices of social media, and they're still here. And the most amazing thing about that is Ayanna is still trying to figure out if she's in the Freaknik documentary on Hulu, right? Like, we all are.
I'm not. Good news. I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay. We
did check, though. We did have to do a check, but I'm good.
She cleared it. But I'm just saying that type of pressure that these young people are living on, they've lived through cycles of trauma. I don't think that we're in a position to give them any type of, the only thing they need from us is grace, is my point, Danny. That's what I've been working with. That is what I've been working with in my head, to make sure that this generation gets a ton of grace.
I so appreciate that. Let me flip it. What advice or what lessons and or best practices can we as Gen Xers or older millennials take from the younger generation?
Create a succession plan. Don't be afraid to go home, retire, find something else to do, get a hobby, right? Allow new leadership. That's what they hate when I say that about the United States Congress, because they just go nuts because, Democratic leadership for way too long was really old, and Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and all of our front runners are really old. And every time I get on TV and say that, they really had a problem with it. But just create a succession plan, cultivate new leadership, and allow this generation to flourish. I mean, they're going to be better than us. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. I'm going to ask a public affairs question. I mean, you're specific to how you're back to counseling clients and to public affairs and or the relevant legislation across industries. What's the most impactful way that you've counseled a client on not only getting their message out there, but not influencing policy, if you will, but engaging with public affairs opinion leaders in a way that actually does not look cloying and is authentic and actually moves the needle for across industries?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question, Danny, because, being on both sides and actually being a former elected official, you'll be surprised how many people know how to speak to elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing you have to realize is that your issue is not the most important issue they're dealing with. Every client you have, their issue is the most important issue to them, period. When they speak to an opinion leader, a thought leader, somebody who's impactful on policy, I guarantee you it's not the most important issue to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And they do not know how to talk to someone as such. And a lot of times it's understanding who you're talking to, meeting them where they are, and doing more listening than actual advocating. You can learn more about these people by listening to them. And the best example I can give you is that when I got elected the most powerful man in the state of South Carolina, we're a legislative state, which means our legislature has more power than even our governor. The most powerful person is the president of the Senate. His name was Glenn McConnell. My dad was a civil rights hero, helped found SNCC, got shot in the movement, went to prison twice, all those things. And so I'm the son of a civil rights, icon here in South Carolina. Glenn McConnell owned a Confederate memorabilia shop, right? We just come from two opposite ends of the spectrum. And so I realized that those were the purse strings. I came from really poor district. Within 2 years, Glenn became one of my very best friends. And the way I did that was that the first thing I didn't walk up to him and the first thing to talk to him about was, how are your views on abortion, right? That's not how I started the conversation. I talked about the Episcopal Church because we were both Episcopalian, right? I talked about Deal or No Deal, which is his favorite show on TV. And so there's an element of not just asking people for something, telling them thank you for the work that they've done, understanding who they are holistically as people. I think we've lost that in the way that we communicate and talk at people. The first thing your clients want to do, and this is not, I'm overgeneralizing purposefully, but the first thing your clients want to do is talk at people. Mm-hmm. They want a platform so they can talk at somebody and tell them why their views and why their issue is the important issue and issue du jour. And I would argue that the strategy, particularly with thought leaders, is to say thank you and listen to them. Some are more difficult than others, which is why I'm really not excited about ever going to the United States Congress, because working with those people does not seem to be like a fun thing to do. But it's necessary because the overwhelming majority are still good people. I walk in under Tim Scott, good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. I would give Tim Scott a kidney today. If Tim called me and was like, Bakari, I'm going in kidney failure, I need a kidney, I'd be like, man, you can have both of mine if I can live like that, but you can definitely get one. I would never vote for Tim Scott. And he knows that. But that is just simply the way that it should be, in my opinion, that you can love someone and differ in opinion, and still work towards a common goal.
Danny, we have a few questions in queue if this is a good time to jump in. One of the questions, Bakari, has to do with how vocal you are in your book about health disparities. Spending a lot of time, obviously, talking about the toll of COVID on underserved communities, and then having a very personal account about how the Black maternal health crisis showed up in your own life. Is the media doing enough to amplify this issue?
No. Good point. I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off. That was rude of me, but the answer is no. I mean, because it's not a sexy story. Nobody wants to hear about the Black kids in Denmark who grew up in a food desert, or the impact of when you lose your hospital, or the fact that Ayana, you're 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than your white counterparts. It's just not a sexy issue, and we don't do a good enough job. I am trying. One of the things I'm pitching right now at CNN is a story about Black voters, and particularly Black male voters throughout the country, because I think they're going to be the most important. I think they'll be the most important voting bloc. But we are more inclined to tell the same stories we traditionally tell, instead of telling those stories that matter. And so in the book, all I wanted to do was, I guess, what I like to give a voice to the voiceless. And I don't know if you guys do that at Highwire. Danny, I don't know if that's one of your mantras. I feel like that is, but we just need more people who have an ear to the streets. There's so many people who are thirsting to have their voices heard, and we need to make sure that we're giving them a voice.
It is, we have not articulated it that way, Bakari, but we are definitely as mission driven as we possibly can be, specific to being a client service organization, right? And wanting to attach ourselves to brands and clients that we believe in, and that we can really authentically support and tell their stories. So it's a bit of a non-answer, but
it's an answer I agree with. I'm just standing up to plug it up. So keep going.
Yeah, all good.
We have another question related to that, Danny, but you tell me. Did you have one?
Yeah, I'm looking at the question here, Yana, from one of our client guests, Dom from Amazon. When you have a brand that hasn't traditionally shown up in minority spaces, do you have advice for working with those outlets without imposter syndrome? How do you remain authentic to your brand and present stories that are relevant and connect with those audiences?
Hire more Black people. That was an easy answer. What's the next one? Like, that's what diversity is called. I mean, that's why, we can literally I can look at an ad, I can look at a marketing campaign and be like, there weren't no women in that room, or there weren't any Black people in that room.
Right.
I mean, I think that having that diversity, particularly at a leadership level, not just at a diversity, equity, and inclusion level, but like within your C-suite, matters so much. And sourcing and listening to the people you serve is so important. I would encourage, particularly at Amazon, I mean, I don't know if you guys do this, but I would do some customer town halls, just to hear what the people, and I don't mean just your bulk customers. I mean the people that, you deliver to, like the people who are in these streets, in these areas. How can you serve them better? What are some of the things they're afraid of about this new AI coming? What are some of the things they appreciate? How can you be better service providers? All of those things matter exponentially.
We would be remiss, given where we are headquartered, if we did not ask you about AI, and I promise to be a little bit more specific about that. But there's, so much conversation around ethical AI and inclusive AI. Do you have a point? I know that I understand this is a very broad question here, Bakari, but is there a particular point of view that you have on AI at this moment?
No, I would love I have a point of view that AI is coming.
Hmm.
I have a point of view that we need to invest, particularly in areas that the technological divide is great and the socioeconomic divide is greater, and cultivate these communities so they don't get further left behind when AI gets here.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about AI coming and taking industries away that are service industries that, provides so many jobs in areas where I grew up, that when AI comes to increase profit margin, it's going to decimate those communities more, instead of providing them with opportunities to grow and be a part of this AI, economic community, for lack of a better term. Congress is so worthless, Danny, that I have no faith that they can regulate it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Is that necessary? Yes.
Mhm.
But are they worthless? Yes. So I would love, love, love to spend some time with you kind of just off camera and text me and tell me some of your opinions on where I should be in terms of thought on AI and ways to move forward. Because if you want me to leave this up to Chuck Grassley, with all due respect, I mean, there's 80-year-old congressmen and senators are not going to be able to tell us how to regulate AI.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen that when we've seen all of the tech leaders testifying in front of Congress based on the questions that that a lot of these members are asking. So that is, again, not meant to be disrespectful. In the Ayanna, I see two other questions here in the chat, but I want to make sure that I'm not cutting you off.
Well, sort of related to this conversation about AI, Bakari, in your book, you talk a lot about voter disengagement and the role that disinformation plays. And
Yes.
so I think we're really eager as a community here at Highwire to talk about how we can counsel our clients and just, on behalf of ourselves, how do we stay above this disinformation fray? You lay out like, hey, it shows up in places you wouldn't expect. Like, what's your advice?
My advice is when my libertarian streak comes through, and we have this is when individual responsibility takes over. You're responsible for the news that you source. I remember back in 2016, I had this woman that kept calling me talking about Hillary Clinton and getting caught with warehouses full of ballots. And I said, Mama, if you don't stop reading me stories off of Facebook, we're going to have a whole problem. Right. She was like getting these articles off like cbs.co. It wasn't even .com. It was like .co. And it was just feeding misinformation. And she was circulating. And her problem wasn't the fact that Hillary Clinton had boxes of ballots. She just didn't want her girl Hillary to get caught with the boxes of ballots. And so it was a fascinating discussion with a woman with 2 degrees about how misinformation is so pervasive. We're responsible for the news that we source. We're responsible for the individuals that we trust. My suggestion is that the number one value that you can have as a company and the number one value you can teach your clients to have is trust. Once that trust is broken with your clientele, you'll never get it back. Never get it back.
That is just picking up on that. Trust is at the heart of so many. It's at the heart of our strategy when we go in to talk to new clients. It is about that establishment of trust of their brand. Not, it's the establishment of trust, obviously, between their communications partner and them, but then it's about how we are going to partner with them to actually create that trust with their audiences. And I think that that's, again, a bit cliche, but you'd be surprised at well, it sounds like we're in agreement that there is there's a crisis of confidence with a lot of brands out there, and that's why they're coming to communications organizations to actually build that trust. Are you seeing trust being particularly at risk in any particular industry? I'm sorry, I keep driving you back to different industries just because.
No, I mean the media, yeah, the pillars of democracy, media, law enforcement, just those age-old traditional institutions. It's a military, right? Defense, just some of those age-old, the newer industries, the way I learned about finances is, you remember when you or your parents got mailed credit cards? You remember that? They would actually mail you a physical credit card. My dad would cut it up in front of us and be like, look, if you don't have the money to pay for it, you shouldn't have it. So that's how I learned that's why my credit was 530 when I graduated from Morehouse, because I didn't have any credit at all because my dad didn't teach me about it. A lot of my classmates at least had $300 credit card bills, not Cleve Sellers. Nope. No credit card at all. So that's why my credit score was in the trash. I say all of that to say that, particularly in these kind of newer industries, you're beginning to see where trust is not that much of a factor, i.e. Bitcoin, right? Nobody knew Bitcoin from, whatever. It was just something new. It was a flash in the pan. People are still very much invested in it. NFTs, all those other things. Some of those age-old foundational instruments, media, journalism, law enforcement, etc., that is where you're seeing the erosion thereof.
Yeah, and we're it's sort of in the thick of it, if you will, because obviously we can't put our clients' stories forward without engaging with media that we trust and making recommendations that they engage with media that actually are going to move the needle for them and it's authentic, right? I think we have time for one last question.
I agree. I think, can we ask about the question of, we've heard about the power of local media. Someone asked the question, when do you focus on the power of national media? When is that most impactful?
When that opportunity presents itself. National media is things you can't control, those global events. You can't control those nationally sexy events. You can't control those icons that may break through. You just have to be prepared when that opportunity presents itself. Local media, you can control a lot more. And so you focus on the things you have control over. But if you build a groundswell in a particular area, there will be a reporter that sees a story that says, I want to cover this. Or maybe it'll break through because of something visual, a video, et cetera, body-worn camera video, whatever it may be. An invention, I don't know. Those things break through, and then you have to be prepared for the moment. If you gear up, it's kind of like going viral. You know how many young people come to me and like, I want to go viral. I've never gone viral on purpose. Never. People don't go viral on purpose. That's the thing. It's like, it's opportunity meets preparation meets amazing outcomes.
Yeah. That is a poignant note to end on, Bakari. It is always incredibly joyful and eye-opening to speak with you, and we really appreciate you taking the time during this incredibly busy moment for you. No pun intended. Congratulations on your latest book. We're actually giving some out to the folks on this call today. We're raffling some.
And Danny, before we wrap, there is someone in the Highwire community who, speaking of Bakari going all over the world to speak, she was in her high school audience when she heard Bakari speak, and she just wanted to share a special thank you for your time today. Sarah?
Yes. Hi. So great. I actually met you 13 years ago when you spoke at my high school, which is feels like a lifetime ago now, but actually we had a conversation in that meeting that actually influenced heavily my decision to pursue a degree in law. So I just want to say thank you. It really shaped the way I don't practice law, obviously. I work at Highwire, but it really shaped the way I communicate. And I've thought about that conversation a lot in the past 13 years. So I just wanted to say thank you for speaking with us and speaking to me then.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I will meet you at the top. And I always tell people, one of the things I probably told you back then, and I tell people all the time, is to dream with your eyes open. And so I appreciate that. That means a great deal to me and makes me know that my life is not in vain. I'm working hard out here. And at least there's one person I can count on who my message resonated with. So I appreciate you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, Bakari Sellers. We really appreciate you.
Have a blessed day, everybody.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.